Here are thoughts as of having played our third session of The Mountain Witch. And those who've been watching can definitely see that slow burn, or burn meaning a progress of different phenomena, is really intrinsic to this game. Briefly, it shocks and horrifies me insofar as people would present this as, a quick jump in here, experience this. This game does this for you. Immediate sort of experience. All of my successful play with the game has been over a good solid number of sessions. Well, in this case, I want to call attention to three things. The first is my use of the resolution system. It's based on comparing two numbers, typically the results of a single die versus the range possible from a single die, which can be increased under a number of ways. Well, the point being is that you're going to get a range that's from 1 to 5, and anything over 5 due to other phenomena is going to just be treated as a difference of 5. And the terminology for it is highly specific to the game. There's things called partial success and mixed success and double success and critical success. It's pretty fine-grained in its phrasing, and I don't actually always grasp what is meant. The term partial success has a long and difficult history in role-playing, and I confess I've pretty much thrown it out. I'm not sure I've thrown it out as a result through other mechanics, but I've thrown it out as a term to refer to in a rules sense. So in this case, I read it again. It's been years, but a fresh eye perhaps on the text I thought might help, and I read it as if I had not read it before. And I came to the conclusion that the options in the weirder or more nuanced this and that, but not this kind of sections for those outcomes, they always included an option of damage. So, in other words, you get a particular sort of success, like a partial or something, and if you look at it, and at the end it says, after all this explanation, at the end it says, if you can't come up with anything else, then you get, a success, but you take a wound. Or you fail and you take this wound, or something like that. It's a fairly careful. So what I did was I wrote them all out again, and I said, what if I get this kind of success? What happens and how much damage do I take? Just treating that as the default. And also, if a foe gets that kind of success against me, then what happens to me and what happens to them? Because a lot of them involve mutual damage. That's an important point about the system. You can win the roll, technically, but end up taking some damage in some cases. So I wrote it all out that way, and then I said, that's the default. I'm only going to go to sort of these more qualitative assessments of what does it mean by a partial success if I'm trying to sneak past the guard. That, to me, wanders down some very strange road that I can't really use. So with that in hand, first of all, damage is huge in the game. The more damage everybody's taking, the better. So, reading it this way, which is effectively when the dice come out, damage will be done, and you're kind of hoping that it's mostly going to the foe and not onto you, even when you succeed. And, woe betide you if you don't succeed. So with that in mind, and knowing that there's this hard mechanical, you're going to have a minus on that sheet, and it might last the rest of the entire game. With that in hands, I think we know that pulling out the dice in a combat is serious business. And with that stated, now let's take a look at what's going on in our game. And I think that decision of mine to try and clarify the rules in those terms in my head has contributed to this, which is that you'll notice after 3 sessions, and with several, if not all, players hammering their dark fates pretty hard, and already, behavioral differences and values differences, priorities differences, and likes and dislikes are becoming quite clear. I think they were clear from the beginning, or were present to a small extent in the beginning. People kind of shifting to feel their way into their character, looking at this dark fate as kind of an abstraction. But as we have moved along, at this point, they're, second nature, and growing, burning, steadily. And what I see is that makes the most sense, because they know how important trust is to making it through these difficult moments, these dangerous times. And I think they've pretty much figured out that, I've got a whole bag of dangerous and I'm going to keep throwing it at them. It's not like I have a threat budget or something like that in the Mountain Witch. There will be more. There will be more. Here I come. The only thing the players have in their favor is that I can't roll anything higher than a 6. And with that in mind, therefore, they have kept their trust up. Nobody's really, I think there's been 1 point of trust reduced at the most across all 4 characters. And part of that is that they know that they need to have some trust points on hand for every other character, because they've noticed that the combats shift around, and all of a sudden you're dealing with this person, that person's in the most danger, and I'm in a lot of danger right now, and who knows who's going to have a free hand to come to my aid. And so you can see that dropping trust, just basically a flat statement of saying, I don't trust you, I give you 0 trust. That hasn't happened. One might say, well, there hasn't been much reason to yet. Well, that's not really the point. The point is whether that kind of thing has happened. What I would focus on, if you go back and look at the chapters that we've done so far, so there's the starting trust values from the Zodiacs, and then there's what happens at the end of the first chapter, and that was after they fought the samurai in the village. And then the second chapter, which I've, treated fairly extensively. There was quite a lot in that second chapter. Perhaps even that was worth 2, but I made it 1. And they chose to either raise trust by the permitted 1, or to keep it where it was. And I think there may have been 1 dropped by 1, but I'm not sure. But anyway, the point is that check and see who they didn't raise it in, because technically, you can raise a point of trust in all the other samurai, all the other ronin. That's great, right? Why wouldn't you raise it by 1 every time? That's what you should perceive right now at the end of session 3 as a tacit negative. Take a look at who it is, and you will not be surprised. It tracks perfectly to what they have done and said to one another, despite having to fight together. So right now, the trust that they're giving to each other in some cases is very pragmatic, very grudging emotionally on the parts of the characters. And I think that's extremely significant. It just may not be very clear if you say, well, trust of 2 is a trust of 2 is a trust of 2. No, it's not. This person's trust of 2, was hard built. That person's trust of 2 hasn't changed from the start. There's a difference. So anyway, the thing that I can't tell you, until until we're finished and all the videos are available, concerns their dark fates. The easiest one, the easiest one to play, the hardest one perhaps in terms of content, is Mark's character, Unadono. He got the fear one. His samurai is haunted by this terror of something coming to get him, and it is coming to get him. It's either waiting for him on the mountain, or it's pursued him here, and he's absolutely just scared to death of it. And so I told Mark that, I don't know what it is. You're he's like, well, I really have to make something up, and so we talked it over. And he decided it was secrets of his character's past, even though he has his stated reason to us as players, of his character's backstory, why he needs the money, why he's a Ronin. But it's worse than that. There's stuff about those details. There's things that just maybe even the way the character relates to what we do know, he cannot face, and the idea that people will find out and what they might do to him, that they would never trust him, that they would kill him, is overwhelming to the character. And he was saying, well, how do we play that? And I said, well, I basically have to make an entity or some way, it has to be able to be told. So we talked a little bit about sort of a symbolic entity. I guess we could have been really frou-frou and it only existed in his mind. And so everyone else is like, what owl? What? But, that's a little too, I don't know, a little too, oh my God, we're playing Ronin fantasy here. Let's toss in a critter. So we looked around, cats and other sort of semi-sinister entities, animals. I didn't really want it to be a ghost. That seemed possible. But anyway, he settled on the Fukuru, the owl. As soon as he fell in love with those big orange red eyes, and instantly. So you can see in play what has become of it. I'm playing it weird. So as I say, it's easy to play. All I have to do is sort of loom there and do weird shit and hint, and his character kind of loses his shit. I really liked the way in the earlier sessions when I first introduced the Fukuru. I mean, he brought it in with the eyes and everything, and then I developed it in the next session. And I really liked the way that his character made plausible suggestions. Everyone else is like, what do we do? There's this weird owl, and they're running around and making all kinds of suggestions and doing things. And he's like, let's do that. And it's very in with the thick of everyone else's suggestions. But if you know that his character is quaking inside and is making suggestions that are all about, no one listened to the owl. It makes a lot more sense when you view it in retrospect, knowing that. I knew the dark face because since we're playing by screen, I had to pass out the cards randomly, by screen. And so whether the game master is, quote, supposed to know it or not really doesn't matter in the game. What's important is that the game master cannot make stuff up. Introduced making up stuff isn't what the GM does. The player brings the stuff in. The game master can then develop it insofar as it seems, plausible or not making up, more stuff. And the game master can then use and play all those introduced elements hard, which is exactly what you see with me and the owl. So like I said, easy to play, a little bit harder in terms of content because Mark really had to come up with, well, I'm afraid of something. Okay. What? I don't even know if he quite has it fully gelled, like what the character did or not. It may or may not ever have to become fully relevant. The emotional state, though, the terror, that's kind of what I'm at this point of talking before we've played session 4. That's what I'm looking forward to that. Well, let's see the others. The one that often takes center stage as play progresses is the Dark Pact, the one where the Ronin has made the pact with the witch. They have an agreement. The witch is going to honor it, so there isn't going to be that kind of thing of, aha, you accorded with the pact and it all turns out badly for you because the witch betrayed you. No, that's not it at all. The witch will honor the pact. And so it is up to the player whether fulfilling the pact actually subverts the mission, the shared mission, or not. Can they fulfill the pact but still try to kill the witch? Now, of course, it seems sensible and thematically consistent with the game that the others killing the witch like right away or as soon as possible, it would not be compatible with fulfilling the pact. Players can also be a lot more problematic about it. Something like, "Well, I've brought you these victims," kind of thing. But the idea, and the player also has to decide what it is. I mean, what are they getting out of the pact, and what do they have to give for the pact? Have they already given it, and are now just collecting their due from the witch, or is being up on the mountain part of collecting it? I've pacted with the witch to kill the witch. Might sound like a gimme. I've recalled that, but believe me, it can be quite important. I have pacted with the witch to kill the witch means no one else has. And considering how important working together is, and the fact that everybody's probably running around with a minus or two on their rolls by that point, makes that kind of interesting. The pactor may need the others to agree to help maintaining the trust. If you're going to betray the others in some horrible way because of the pact, then again you're going to want to keep the trust nice and high until that point. So you might end up looking like the nicest of the bunch until it comes down. So the Dark Pact basically can be played 1,000 different ways and have 1,000 different trajectories or outcomes. Don't forget, you can break the pact. I mean, just like you might overcome your fear, nobody's saying that the outcome of play has to accord. The Dark Fate isn't a mandated ending or development due to it. So that's a very interesting point as well. Okay, so those two are relatively straightforward in terms of game master player, and the nuances across the players are like wide open in 100 ways, and the content is wide open in a bunch of cool but at least fairly understandable ways. We know what a pact is, we know what fear is. Well, the other two are potentially in a different class of the four they have, because the other two are the really emotional ones: vengeance and desperately in love. And so Ola has played the desperately in love real straight up. He first chance we got to look at it, he was gazing at the lock of hair. The second chance that we saw, when I brought it in, there I am, oh, you have a lock of hair. Okay, look, the wicked monk guy, he's got the lock of the same hair. He's talking smack about her, that basically Ola said, okay, I'm all in, and is almost ready to just blurt stuff out. And he's played it on a nice climb. Every time it comes up again, every time he's thinking about it, he's already solicited or tacitly solicited and gained commitment from a couple of the other Ronin. I'll help you. Don't worry, she'll be safe, that sort of thing. And that's an interesting point. They seemed rather ready with that kind of statement. And developing that, becomes part of my job. I had a couple of difficult questions. One could say, all right, well, is this person that you're in love with, are they, far back in your past, and now you're just just gutted over the memory of it all, or whatever? It has to be relevant. Somehow it has to be on this mountain, or wrapped up with the witch even more directly. There has to be something going on here, so that it's not just a memory of some disconnected something or other. And there are several different ways. I could put her on the mountain. But I can't do that unless Ola says that she went up the mountain before I did. I can ask, but I can't say. And I can do things like put her on the mountain in terms of having been kidnapped by monsters and brought here, or something equally arbitrary along those lines. But I actually don't want to do that except as a development of something that Ola says. So I'm still kind of waiting on the content. One thing that makes that particular dark pact, I'm not going to say tricky, but it's an option, is to have it the target be one of the other Ronin, and that's possible. And Ola even asked, "Is that the way it's done? How does that work?" And I said, "It's your choice." And he said, "Let's make it someone else." And so he did, and he tied it, I think, into the character's backstory about the marriage that he refused, the arranged marriage that his character had refused, which is why he was disgraced. Goes on from there. So something's pretty clearly. I mean, they knew, or the players knew, that he came from this disgraced situation from having refused this marriage, and now he's sitting around mooning over this lock of hair and chattering about this girl who may be on the mountain and stuff like that, and the monsters are talking about her, what's going on. So I'm basically pushing what I know and having characters talk about her and having things happen that hint at her presence, but I'm still kind of waiting for a bit more about it. That whole thing, though, jumps up a notch because of Helma's character having the other really emotional dark fate, which is vengeance. And I told her that she could pick which of the Ronin that she sought vengeance against, and she picked Ola. And I think it's clearly in that whole backstory about the refused marriage and the this implication of a lost or deeply sincere love. Ola has already been very clear. His statements, his character's recent emotional statements in session 3, as I mentioned during play, translate perfectly to the classic samurai literature terminology of the Giri and the Ninjo, and so it was a beautiful answer. I mean, he was talking to this person who he doesn't know actually is sworn to kill him, and he basically just tells her to her face, my self-respect is more important than my obligations, and it's really nicely put. So Helma has been playing this really interestingly. She's really working that her character is broody and judgmental and, watching all the others. And if you watch, she's actually brought up the antagonism toward Ola's character up and up, even though having fought, for one another in moments of, desperate combat, this notion that her character just is getting darker and darker and more directed and readier is real clear. And so, again, the retrospect on this is the way to go. I don't really have to do much. Helma will hopefully give us a little bit more content about how it is that she has been sworn. But remember, it's up to her to say what Ola has done specifically that deserves vengeance. And I think she may take seriously to incorporate the things we know about that character to make it kind of seamless. But if she says that, Tagachi has done something that Ola has not made up, Ola's got to take it. Oh, Tagachi did that. That's how the rule works. So I'm really looking forward to, we're getting to the point where the players are, well, partly by the rules, but I think also partly by inclination, are not going to they will not be able to keep themselves from kind of outing more about themselves and more about the backstories, more about the motivations, more about the presence of these phenomena on the mountain. If we go back to Kisaragi and the Dark Pact, then things get a little weird because he has really focused on this Hara family symbolism, their honor, their reputation, their emblems, their everything. One could say, oh, well, he hates their guts. That's part of the Dark Pact. It may be. It may be a bit of a dodge to hide the Dark Pact. We don't know. I hope it's fairly substantial in some way because it's obligatory for the player to be providing real information of some kind. But it may be oblique about the pact. So I'm going to be hitting that a little harder as a game master. There's different ways. I mean, with a character with a dark pact in the past, I've actually had a messenger from the witch come and talk to them in secret and stuff like that. Maybe that's the way to go. But I'm not really trying to elicit or provoke, this so much as open the doors for the proactive sensibilities of the players to operate on. So that's where I'm at. The third thing that proceeds from both of those in action, and it may not look like a direct procession, but it is the vividness of the violence. These three things all support one another. The nature of the mechanical damage and the reliability of the rolls. We know that the rolls are going to hurt somebody and possibly both. And then the dark pacts and their burn and the proactivity of the players in both acting on them through their characters' actions and statements, as well as bringing in more about them in terms of the exposure of information, and the fact that it is so enjoyable that the players all know that we are all working with incomplete information. It's part of the joy of play. It's fascinating. Nobody would want to play this game if we all just knew and all read the scripts and played our parts and sort of scampered along in character. And this is very different. And it's not even about winning. I mean, the player at the end doesn't get to wear a little hat or anything like that. That's not the point. So take this into account with the vividness of the violence, and if you want to add this mechanical detail, the fact that your Ronin can die and you continue to play. The rules are extremely well built for that. So there you are, knowing these things. Now we move into the violence itself, and effectively speaking, it's the damage is not the only thing that has to hurt. This is how I see it. This is how I want the combat and violent situations to be processed. When a character, takes damage from being, fought, among the rocks, it may be the raking claws of the creature. It may be that they bang their head against the rocks as they fight, or something. There's aspects of all of this that incidental descriptions, both as results of roles or as the consequences of what someone else did, all of these things, once you start doing it, then one of the aspects that I'm trying to drive at is that it's contagious around the table, that everyone else starts to talk the same way about how their characters do things. They think about what just happened in the last couple of roles by the other players, and they say, and then this, or I have said just enough. It's one of my desires in this to provide just enough. Kisaragi, scuffling on the rooftop with the Yamauba, and I've mentioned that they're dressed in these falling apart rags, and they're old and overgrown and a little too hairy, and this white blonde locks falling everywhere, and their hideous breath from they're raw meat cannibals, right? So it's this hideous breath, and it's on him with its jagged claws. And I mentioned up on the roof that because he'd been dragged up and they're like wrestling around, he's gotten his sword out and they're fighting away, and so they're not like squaring off and doing footwork. They're up there, and I just mentioned it's a little too intimate, and I don't give any other details. I just let the human mind fill in kind of the there's touching going on here inadvertently during this fight that I don't like that. That's ew. And so all I said was just mention this is kind of overly intimate in the contact during the fight because of, the circumstances. And I don't have to do any more. And it led perhaps to the vividness of Nathan, narrating the next act of, I'm trying to kick her off the roof. I'm trying to, so it wasn't like some dazzling display of sword work or anything. I mean, the character is kind of like, and like, kick, fall, get off. And I think that's important. The next narration was his because he succeeds in the role, and the brutality that he brought to that fall and the pain that his character felt, I'll tell you, was far more than I would have inflicted upon him, with that role. In terms of the fictional events. And so that's what I mean by contagious. Everybody is just kind of, it's not just what you say, it's how you say it so someone else picks it up. I mean, at that point, I'm just opening up myself to whatever it is, to that whatever anybody said, and just doing the same thing intuitively on my own. And I find that the system's utter brutality in the fashion that, I've chosen the rules. I've taken the hardest elements of the rules, the most solid textual statements of what you can do with those damage rules. And I say, okay, that's what we do. And therefore, this vividness of the fiction in the context of the trust that they're putting into each other, they're putting in each other and acting upon, and these simmering, these simmering tensions. All of these things really are tremendously synergistic. It's a remarkable design in this way, and I've hoped you've enjoyed it.